Bryant Beeler, I was going to let you know that I'll introduce you further on in the meeting. Had that slide in here a couple of times now and didn't catch you. So just so you're not surprised when that pops up.
Okay, sounds good.
Want to catch you off guard. So, all right, everyone. Well, welcome to the Colorado Hydrogen Network meeting for August. And I know we've probably got a few more people that are going to join, but don't want to necessarily get in the habit of starting too late. So I have muted, I think, just about everybody. So if you do want to say something, I encourage you to jump in. You can try raising your hand. I may miss it, and absolutely feel free to interrupt me, especially if I've got something wrong. So anyway, you can see the agenda here. I don't have any presentations by other companies today. We've done that the past few months. So you're kind of stuck with me today to go through some technical things. We're going to have a little bit of fun. You can see geological hydrogen. We've talked about that before. You're probably familiar with that, but there's been some new developments. I want to talk about hydrogen demand, how to, or some ideas, I guess maybe I should say, about stimulating demand for hydrogen. Hourly matching, this is some of those so-called 3 pillars that have been proposed for the tax credits, the production tax credits for hydrogen. And I talked about that last month, but changed it up a little bit and also want to review that again because it's a hard thing to understand and nobody out there seems to have it right. So I think that's important. So, all right, with that, again, please jump in if anybody's got anything, but I want to talk about a number of things that are going on around the country. The Renewable Hydrogen Alliance, as many of you know, is kind of a sister organization out in the Portland, Oregon area that we're paired up with. And they have an upcoming hydrogen conference. And some of this is probably more of interest to people up in the Pacific Northwest, but I will throw that out there. Maybe if any of you just happen to find yourselves out in Portland on September 19th, perhaps this is something you want to do. And they are going to have exhibit booths and a reception. So perhaps even if you're not interested in hearing the panel discussions, perhaps being at the booths or just networking with folks out there is of interest. So you can learn more. They've got a shortcut. I use the tiny URL shortcut. They use the bit.ly. And I will warn you, it's case sensitive. So make sure the RHA and the C in conference are in caps, or you'll find out, as I did, that you can't get to that. But I probably can't give any more information on this other than what you see here. So take a look at that if that's of interest. Another upcoming event on this Friday is going to be a webinar to talk about the U.S. hydrogen roadmap. And they're going to provide an overview of the strategy, and there'll be leaders from the Department of Energy, White House, to discuss progress on this. And they're going to talk a little bit about how hydrogen-related work is organized and coordinated within DOE. So that may be of interest. And speaking of the shortcuts, I did create this tinyurl.com shortcut. And I assume this is case sensitive. I guess I don't know that for sure, but US H2 roadmap webinar will take you to a link where you can register for this webinar. All right. Another event, there's the company Horizon Educational, which last year at their Grand Prix, which was held in Los Angeles, I was invited to go out there and do some judging. And I was so impressed with what these high school kids had done, building these 10th scale radio controlled cars, and they're hydrogen powered. And those are, of course, built and driven by the students. And that's going to happen this year at the so-called RE Plus trade show. So, you know, another excuse to go to Las Vegas if you need an excuse. But that race will be on September 13th. It's groups from all over the world will be driving. Again, it's all students. And then speaking of the RE Plus trade show, this is a clean energy trade show. It goes on from September 11th to the 14th in Las Vegas. So the groups that founded this are basically the Solar Energy Institute, or the solar industry, I should say. There's a Solar Energy Industries Association, SEIA, as well as the Smart Electric Power Alliance. So take a look. Maybe that's of interest to see what's going on at that. And if you happen to be there on the 13th, you can see the Grand Prix World Finals. All right, another event. I talked about this last time. It's an event called Flying High, which is billed as the world's largest hydrogen aviation event. That's going to be going on in Grand Forks, North Dakota, which seems like kind of an out of the way place, but it is just, I think, about 75 miles north of Fargo. And there is a $300 round trip flight, Denver nonstop to Fargo. So if you're interested, maybe not as far to the middle of nowhere, so to speak, as it might seem, but that's going on October 10th and 11th. And you can get more information there at High Sky's website. And by the way, High Sky was just on the Hydrogen Nowcast podcast. So you might have heard Danielle McLean talking about that and the event, as well as the High Sky organization. And then another event that's just really in the process of forming is going to be out in Grand Junction. It's sponsored by Colorado Mesa University and the Clean Tech Business Coalition. That's the morning of October 11th out in Grand Junction. And I've been invited to speak at that. I'll be speaking for about 30 minutes, but a lot of fossil fuel people out that way. So I think it's going to be really good to make a connection with them and talk about some of the ways that the fossil fuel industry can transition over to hydrogen and how that all works and everything. I think that's going to be real informational for them. So just to let everybody know about that. And I think, yeah, that's the last of the events. Does anybody have any thing to add or questions, or maybe some other events you'd like to mention that I haven't mentioned here? No, we're good. All right. Okay, so I'm going to continue. So as I said, this is going to be a bit of a tech talk today on several different subjects. And the first one that I'd like to talk about is geological hydrogen. And basically what this is hydrogen that occurs naturally underground, and it's a continuous, renewable, and a sustainable process. And a comprehensive review on this really shows that this has been historically underestimated, greatly underestimated. And a part of it is because there's been this existing prejudice that free hydrogen in nature is rare. And I think this comes from the fact that hydrogen is so light, it goes up in the atmosphere. As a matter of fact, it actually will leave the atmosphere. It's so light. And it's also very expansive. Hydrogen molecules tend to repel themselves. And so I think people just assumed that hydrogen just couldn't exist in nature. You know, how could it? Well, but since everyone had that belief, nobody was really looking for it. And so the gases that come from underground and are sampled and so forth, the way those are analyzed in samples and the way those detection systems were designed kind of precluded that they would miss hydrogen. And as a matter of fact, they used, because of these beliefs, they used hydrogen as a carrier gas. So if they were trying to sample for methane or other things, they would use hydrogen as a carrier gas. And so they were always zeroing out that hydrogen. So frankly, they were just missing the fact that there is a lot of naturally occurring hydrogen. And this wasn't the case in the former Soviet Union, because the Soviet researchers were actually looking for that hydrogen. So there's quite a bit of activity now, as I'm learning, around geological hydrogen happening in Colorado. I just had a call this past week with Jeff Ellis, who is a research geologist at the research geologist at the U.S. Geological Survey. And he's also on the faculty at the Colorado School of Mines. And unfortunately, Jeff is in the dentist chair right now, so he wasn't able to join us for this meeting, or we would have had him on. But we're looking to do a presentation of his probably at the November meeting of the Colorado Hydrogen Network, and also hope to put him on a podcast. So the other company, which I have talked about before at this meeting, is Natural Hydrogen Energy. and their website is nh2e.com. And there's their logo. They're based actually in Colorado and Paris. We have a connection with their CEO, Vyacheslav Zgonek, and he goes by the nickname of Slava. And Slava, I've met Slava at his well out in Nebraska in June of 2021. And he lives in Paris, and then one of his business partners is in Colorado. So that's why that company spans those two cities. And then a new one who I'm actually reaching out to connect with is, I think it's pronounced Coloma or Coloma, and that's their website. You can see that there. But they're Colorado based, and Bill Gates, through Breakthrough Energy, along with some other investors, is putting some money into Coloma. So I think we're going to see some really interesting developments through Jeff Ellis, Coloma, Natural Hydrogen Energy, and others on hydrogen basically from wells. So anytime somebody says to you, oh, hydrogen is not a source of energy, it's only a carrier, you can correct them. Politely, of course. And a lot of this hydrogen, and I'm going to show this on the next slide, is occurring along what's called this U.S. mid-continental rift system. And so you notice Natural Hydrogen Energy's well is in Nebraska. You may say, oh, God, Nebraska, what the heck? What's out there? Well, you can see this mid-continental rift does extend down into, at the very bottom left corner of the screen there is Nebraska, and a little bit into Kansas. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops. And there's some other places in the U.S. where natural hydrogen can be found as well. So the mechanisms, these are still trying to be understood, but one of the ways is it's thought to be high temperature reactions between water and other iron-rich minerals, such as olivine, and there's others. And what happens is, as the iron oxidizes, it's grabbing the oxygen atoms from water molecules and releasing the hydrogen. Another source is primordial, or basically ancient hydrogen that was trapped under the Earth's crust and is now seeping through, thousands of kilometers of rock to the surface. So finding it right now is there's places where hydrogen does seep to the surface, and it often either causes certain bacteria that like to live on hydrogen to grow, or it may kill or stunt the vegetation. So sometimes it's visible on the surface and can be found that way. Also looking, of course, at iron-bearing rock formations, and then magnetic surveys. So this is meant to be a tickler on these things. We'll go into this in more detail when Jeff Ellis is on the meeting with us. So it's estimated right now that there's a 98% probability of geologic hydrogen production, meeting up to 50% of the forecast green hydrogen production by the year 2100. So this potential is not trivial. And of course, we'll see how this plays out in the future. I already talked about the mid-continental rift, but also off the eastern seaboard, it's thought to be a good location to look for natural hydrogen. And internationally, some of you may have seen the news articles about this, but in Mali, they're finding this. France has found some, and they're going to be putting some money into developing it, as well as in Australia. Spain thinks they've got quite a bit, as well as Senegal and Africa. So this is really, I think, kind of an exploding story, and so it'll be interesting to see how this does progress. And I see something popped into the chat. Let me take a quick look here. Okay, just a note from Phil Clark. Thanks, Phil.
So Brian,
all right, before I move on, let me, I guess, go to this next slide. So again, as I said, there's a Hydrogen Outcast episode on this. If you haven't already listened to that, you can find that. It was September 16 of last year, so almost a year ago, episode 61. And that featured Vyacheslav Zgonek from Natural Hydrogen Energy. This article in Science Magazine is very good. Jeff Ellis is cited in that, along with Vyacheslav. And I created a shortcut because it was a very long URL, but at tinyurl.com, NatH2 wells. And then, as I said, in November, we're hoping to have Jeff back to this meeting to talk about this, as well as to have Jeff on the Hydrogen Outcast. All right, so I'll pause there for just a second to see if anybody has any comments or any questions about natural hydrogen before I move on.
Hey, so Brian, I was just posting in the chat
Okay.
that
All right. Well, you can always come back to that later too. All right. So I would like to talk a little bit about hydrogen demand. And really what I'm talking about here is that, as I think everyone on this call is aware, we really need to build a hydrogen market. And what I mean by market is multiple sources of supply, multiple users, plus infrastructure. And frankly, we lack probably all three of these in hydrogen today. And it's kind of creating a stalemate. I mean, there are a lot of people out there that would like to sell hydrogen and have the means of doing it, but we don't have many users. And the infrastructure, things like vehicles, engines, other things, is limited, and it's expensive because it's new technology, and the cost of development hasn't been amortized yet, and the cost of production hasn't been gotten down. And another thing that has to be addressed here is scale. In other words, if you can produce 100 tons of hydrogen a day at 25 cents a kilogram, you've got to have a user to take that much. It doesn't do any good to be able to produce a huge amount and only have a small amount of users. And I think the converse is true as well. You can create hydrogen at very low cost, but only a few kilograms a day, but you need a user that wants that small amount. So all of these things together are, I think, conspiring a little bit to hold back the development of the hydrogen market. And I haven't seen this discussed very much. I see a lot of people who want to produce hydrogen, but they're still kind of scratching and looking for users. So part of the reason that I think this is an issue is that I see a lot of the big companies taking a wait and see attitude. I mean, we don't see Shell or BP or Exxon putting hydrogen fuel stations up in town. And I think part of the reason, having worked for a large corporation, is that for a company to try to address the supply and the demand and the infrastructure and the financing all together is kind of outside the normal core competencies. I really can't see Shell going out and speaking to individual fleet owners to say, hey, if you'll buy our fuel, we'll put up a station. Maybe they're doing that, but I don't know that they are. And so I think that's an issue. And then also, these new markets typically start pretty small. You do see hydrogen producers out there with big ideas of huge amounts of hydrogen because they can recoup their return on investment, their ROI. But a lot of these markets have to start small. And so the overhead and the profit expectations of these large corporations isn't really addressed very well by starting small. Now, startup companies, on the other hand, their business model, I mean, they can go out and talk to fleets and look at coming up with vehicles so they can address the supply and the demand and the infrastructure, and they can profitably start at a small scale. But their ability to finance these things or to sign up for big lines of credit and have the credentials, I guess I'll say, to do that is limited. So again, these things are kind of conspiring to get the hydrogen market going. So what's the answer? Well, like I say, we can't just have companies offering to sell hydrogen. I mean, it's not really enough. What we really need is for people that want to get involved in the hydrogen space to go out there and develop these partnerships between, maybe if you're a supplier, go out and talk to the users, look at the infrastructure and the suppliers, and search for areas of funding. And funding can be things like there's state and federal incentives. I know in Colorado, there's a 35% tax incentive for investors. State of Colorado also has the Clean Fleet Enterprise and the Clean Transit Enterprise, which can help close the gap between the price of hydrogen vehicles or battery vehicles, for that matter, and the comparable price for gasoline and diesel. So there are some incentives out there. And then grants. The state of Colorado has got grants, the Department of Transportation. Some of us just applied for one there, and of course, Department of Energy. And then, of course, as I said earlier, and I wanted to repeat this, that we've got to address scale. All right. So that's kind of my soapbox on this whole idea of hydrogen demand, to just kind of change our mindset a little bit to think about providing that whole cloth solution of supply and infrastructure and going out and actually enlisting the customers. Is there any questions or comments at that point? Doing good. Okay. All right. So as I pointed out last month, the Department of Energy is tagging about $1 billion of the hydrogen hub money for this demand side of things. And I was really glad to see this, and really anxious to see where this goes. And as they put it, the idea behind this is to tackle revenue certainty issues that arise from this imbalance between supply scale up and demand formation. Unfortunately, they kind of have to happen together, and that's kind of a difficult thing to do. And this mechanism is going to help to enable some private sector financing. I think when the private sector sees that the government is behind this, that will help reduce some of their risk. There was a so-called notice of intent, the NOI, I'm sorry, from the Department of Energy on this. The public input on that window is closed, but this should lead next to a funding opportunity announcement, an FOA, so we'll watch for that. And this is a quote from them saying, developing a hydrogen demand side initiative is critical to ensuring the early commercial viability of a hydrogen hub, given that demand formation for a new energy source typically lags creation of a reliable supply. All right, any other comments or any comments or questions, I should say? Everybody's pretty quiescent today. Either that or I've done a good job covering it.
Brian.
All right, so I'd like to switch gears to talk again about hourly matching. And I did cover this last time, and I'm going to go over this just a little bit differently, but it's important enough and it's hard enough to understand that I really feel like it's important to cover this. And basically, I would say this idea arose from a mistaken belief that the clean energy or the electric energy creation has to occur at the same time as it's used for hydrogen generation, and that would be by water electrolysis. And the feeling, I think, among the people that are promoting hourly matching and some other things is that this is the only way to assure that only clean energy and not dirty energy was used to generate hydrogen if you're going to apply for this production tax credit. And this idea is false. And I think that is a hard concept to grasp because we tend to think of electricity as being instantaneous, but that's not really the case of electrical energy. And I'm going to talk about that here. So really, the only thing that has to happen to assure that there's a match between clean energy, which could be wind, solar, geothermal, hydroelectric, whatever, between that clean energy creation and hydrogen generation, is those things only have to occur in the same amount and within the same observation window, I'll call it, or billing interval. In other words, perhaps a month. And I'm going to explain how this works here. Now, that interval really is arbitrary. I mean, an hour would work, but to have to do that every hour is really burdensome. It could be a day, but again, that's a lot of accounting, as is a week. And typically energy, we pay our electric bills monthly, and a month is really a good amount of time, I think, for this observation window. So because we're tracking energy, energy already contains the element of time, right? Energy is power times time. I mean, it's evident in the units of watt hours or kilowatt hours, megawatt hours, or whatever. All right, so because energy already contains a time element, it's commoditized, it's quantifiable, it's exchangeable. Now, the obvious thing is that if we were to turn kilowatt hours of electricity into hydrogen, that's a little bit easier to understand because it's tangible. You can actually hold it in a container. You could, well, you can't see it, it's transparent, but I mean, it's a thing. But energy really can be created and consumed, and these quantities of energy can be traded and exchanged in time or place. And again, that seems a little counterintuitive because electricity we tend to think of as instantaneous, but we've tracked this, we've accounted for it over time as energy. We're not talking about watts, we're talking about watt hours here. So it is a quantity that can be traded and exchanged. So this is why kind of the theory about why energy production, energy use do not have to be simultaneous and why hourly matching doesn't make any sense. So here's an example, and I showed this last time, but I'm going to do this again. So let's say we have an electric grid and we've got coal or gas or nuclear, well, not nuclear, but coal or gas electricity production, and that's putting out 300 gigawatt hours per month. And that's an arbitrary number, but since there's 30 days in a month, you'll see why that's kind of convenient. And everybody on the grid, the homes and the businesses and so forth, are using that 300 gigawatt hours in a month. So the grid's going along happily. And now all of a sudden, we want to add a renewable source and a hydrogen load to our grid. We want to use the grid to transfer this energy. So let's say we've got some wind generators, and let's say they're putting out 30 gigawatt hours per month, and they write a contract with somebody who wants to produce hydrogen, say for a fuel station, at 30 gigawatt hours per month. So that's balanced, that's the same amount, and they want to do that. All right, so now you say, well, gosh, what if, oh, and by the way, this is just, you're going to see this later in this example, but 30 gigawatt hours per month is, let's just say it's a gigawatt hour per day. It doesn't have to be constant. And of course, the 300 gigawatt hours is 10 gigawatt hours per day. All right, so let's say that we've got this set up with this wind generator and this hydrogen station. And let's say for some reason, maybe the hydrogen for some reason. So they're not using that renewable energy, but the source, the wind generator, wants to continue to put that on the grid. Well, what's going to happen? The other loads on the grid are still going to take their 10 gigawatt hours. But what's going to happen is that dirty energy will have to get reduced by 1 gigawatt hour. So that gigawatt hour of clean energy basically went to the other loads that were sitting on the grid before. And so there was 1 gigawatt hour of decarbonization that happened. It just didn't get used by the hydrogen fuel station this time. All right, so let's say another day, the wind doesn't blow, but the hydrogen station still needs to make their hydrogen. Well, that amount's going to have to be made up by a 1 gigawatt hour increase in dirty energy. So I think you can see where this is going. There's a trade of clean energy, dirty energy in time. And so at one point, there was a 1 gigawatt hour decrease. And then at another point, there was a 1 gigawatt hour increase. And this all happens within a billing interval. So they really canceled out. So
Hey, Philip.
This is why clean energy creation and the use for hydrogen generation can occur at different times.
Did you hear me okay?
And it didn't at all change the amount of dirty energy that got made. And I think this is where a lot of the environmentalists get all wrapped around the axle, because they say, well, wait a minute, if we're making hydrogen using electricity from the grid and it had to come from this dirty utility power plant, oh, that's dirty energy. But if the accounting balances out so that throughout that billing interval, the amount that the wind generator produced and the hydrogen the hydrogen station used are equal, then they qualify for the tax credit. Now, I will say that if the hydrogen station is going to use more in that month than the wind generator will produce, yes, that will come from dirty energy, and it doesn't apply for the tax credit. So I'll talk about that a little bit more. So and this is where I'm saying this. So when clean energy exceeds the hydrogen load, the dirty energy is decreased in order to keep the grid balanced. And when the hydrogen load exceeds clean energy, the dirty energy is increased in order to keep the grid balanced. So basically, energy is traded in time. But again, we have to look at it over that billing interval to really make that conclusion. And by the way, that's why if you're trying to do this hourly, I mean, you get really wrapped up because hydrogen load is there, but the wind is not, and it's back and forth. And so you're faced with this monumental task of looking at all these hours when you really could just look at it over the month, because the electric meters keep track of all of that for you. So when they're equal, of course, no dirty energy is used, and the grid got used for the transfer of clean energy. And this really does indicate, though, that the clean energy source and the paired hydrogen load don't have to operate synchronously, but they need to be paired. So again, as I said, the billing interval is arbitrary. A month is probably a good interval because that's common for energy billing. So hourly matching really causes serious problems. I mean, nobody benefits from hourly matching, not the environment, not people, not anybody. But if hourly matching is adopted, it's really going to be a struggle for hydrogen generators to be able to access the tax credit, even though they may have lined up a clean energy source and they're using the same amount of energy as that source is producing. And that's because a lot of hydrogen generators have to operate continuously because the equipment's very expensive. You'd have to oversize if you're going to be turning it on and off. And so they want to get the biggest possible return on investment for their equipment. And of course, wind and solar, as we're all familiar with, are intermittent. So even though the renewable source and the hydrogen generator producing and using exactly the same amount of energy in a billing interval, it won't be simultaneous, and it doesn't need to be. So how do we know that the energy from some renewable source or clean source only went to the hydrogen load and it wasn't double sold or there wasn't any skullduggery going on? And really, this is determined through a contract, something like a power purchase agreement or renewable energy credits. And there we go. And this attests, otherwise you're lying with your contract, that the energy is only being sold to the one user. And it also defines the energy quantity. It's the wind source or whatever saying it's this many gigawatt hours per month. And so the hydrogen generating load knows what to expect and how many of those sources they need to sign up. And of course, as I already pointed out, the energy quantity from the source and used by the hydrogen load is, of course, verified by the electric meters at the source and load. So a better alternative to hourly matching is to use 4 criteria. As I just pointed out, some kind of a contract between the clean energy source and the hydrogen generator, electric metering to verify what was actually put onto the grid and what was pulled off of the grid. And then the data needs to be collected during some kind of a billing interval. We don't want to be doing this over 10 years and wait for 10 years to decide whether the source and the load matched. It needs to be a little bit more regular, like a month. And of course, the source and the load have to be connected to the same electrical grid. And the obvious example here is you don't want wind generators in Hawaii saying that they're selling their electricity to a hydrogen station in New York. I mean, obviously, there's no electrical grid connecting those. So these 4 criteria can account for any combination of grid situation. Things like curtailment. If the wind generator is told, hey, the grid can't take your electricity, there's no demand for it, and they have to shut down, their meter is going to reflect that. And so the amount of energy that is able to go to the hydrogen load is going to be different between what the source produced and the hydrogen load used. And so only when those 2 amounts match are those watt hours applicable to the tax credit. And if there's a lot of clean energy on a grid and not much dirty energy, the meters, again, between the paired source and the hydrogen load are going to reflect that. And if the load on the grid changes drastically and the utility has to turn things up or down, again, the meters are going to reflect that. So you're not going to be in a situation where any hydrogen load is trying to claim that some kind of dirty energy was part of the production tax credit. It just can't happen under this scenario. So the benefits to these 4 criteria versus hourly matching and some of the other things proposed is that this assures that the clean energy that's used for hydrogen generation and taken credit for the production tax credit is true and genuine. And this is really an achievable paradigm, I think, for hydrogen generators who may want to operate 24/7. And I talked about this, and I mentioned this previously in the Hydrogen Nowcast episode 75, which aired on July 7th. So let me pause there. I got to think there's maybe some comments or questions, maybe lack of understanding, or it doesn't make sense to somebody. Any thoughts?
Well, Brian, this is Frans. I think, I'm not.
Frans, I just saw your video appear. Did you have something to say?
Yeah.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but.
Can you hear me or no?
Oh, yeah, now I hear you. Yeah,
Okay.
Sorry.
Good. Yeah, I do think that one of the assumptions you have in your analysis is that there is fossil-based large capacity power generators that you can borrow from. Mm-hmm. So borrow from and give back. And I do think a lot of the opposition is basically saying we want to go as fast as possible away from fossil-based large-scale generators. So that is one of the drivers that I don't think you address, that is driving some of the promoters of this hourly matching. So there is more tolerance for borrowing from battery capacity that is absolutely created directly out of renewables, rather than I borrow from the coal plant or the natural gas plant, and then when I can use it back, I give it back, kind of. So I think is what I picked up, where people saying, hey, we don't want to have something that is so much of a bridge. We want to go directly to the final solutions.
Well, and remember, the purpose of these rules is to assure that if a hydrogen user or a hydrogen creator, I'll put it that way, is claiming a tax credit for renewable energy, that it really came from renewable energy. So there are other issues involving curtailment or how green is the grid and those kind of things, which are issues, but they're really outside of the scope of this production tax credit, which is just to say, what's a rule that guarantees that if somebody is generating hydrogen and applying for this tax credit, that they really did use clean energy. And this does this. Now, I guess what this doesn't solve is if a hydrogen generator is paired up with, say, Bob's wind generator, but Bob's wind generator can't supply it, but Sam's solar can, and so the hydrogen generator is pulling that. That's still clean energy. And I'm not sure how we track that. So there is that issue. But again, these criteria are really set out just to assure that if somebody's applying for this tax credit, that it really did come from renewable energy. It's not trying to force the hydrogen generators to shut down if there's no renewable energy. I mean, that's really out of scope, I think, for this. So Frans, does that kind of address what you worry about there?
Not 100%. I do think the opposition is basically saying, hey, if over the period of a month you use firming or fossil-based firming to for periods feed the electrolyzers, but over the total amount of time, that amount of energy was produced in total, what was used for producing the hydrogen, we're fine. And they say, no, we basically don't want to have on an hourly basis any kind of firming feeding the plant. Even over the total equation over the months, you are equal. So it basically is, we don't want to see any kind of these incentives go to any further investment into firming applications, and certainly not into blue hydrogen. And so I think that is kind of what we're saying. So if any of that would trigger these type of investments, we want to see the government incentive go to something that completely goes free of that. Like, spend your money on geothermal. That came up in the last meeting we had. So I do agree with you that this balances it out. I do think that staying away for a period of time for hourly tracking is that this allows us to create infrastructure faster. The challenge on itself is large enough, and very fast going to 80% reduction is better than, you know, getting way later to 100%. So we'll deal with that last piece next. So I do think in the total scheme, reducing coal generation, that is no firming. It's no firming anymore. There's no opportunity to firm with coal, but you can firm with combined cycle gas turbines. There's a 75+ reduction of CO2. You start building infrastructure of larger scale, continuous generating hydrogen plants, which you have to do to get some scaling and a proper size of the market. Over time, when we have that large infrastructure, you want to get away from depending on firming. It's just not now it's just now we need to put all hands on deck to get some scale in the hydrogen production and demand. We shouldn't do stupid stuff, but also you shouldn't kind of do things and hold up that whole progression. So that's kind of my opinion. But I just wanted to see that in your analysis, although you're theoretically right, there are some elements in it that drive some of the opposition that you didn't take into account. And that is, we don't want to see any fossil-based fuel in this mix.
Well, and let me say it a little bit differently. I think I understand what you're saying about firming in that if we now have a bunch of intermittent renewable energy on the grid, and we've got a lot of hydrogen generation using the grid, if now that causes utility to build new coal or gas plants in order to satisfy those intermittent periods, that's what we're trying to avoid. And I think that's what you mean by firming, that we're not building new plants, the dirty plants to take care of that.
Or spending money on upgrading. And
oh yeah.
And there is absolutely, and it's close to home, certainly here in Colorado, there is this kind of, okay, if we close these coal plants, we have to put some investments into natural gas infrastructure to be a reliable firming source to renewables to keep the light on. But if we start producing hydrogen on the grid with high energy takeoff, we might have to do more. Mm-hmm. So that's the equation, I think, that is driving this.
Well, I absolutely agree. And I think there's a whole host of issues here as the grid starts to change between how energy was generated before and going to renewables and having hydrogen on it. Things like curtailment. That's a big issue in California right now, where there's so much wind and solar on, they're shutting it off all the time because the grid can't take it. And what about storage? What kind of storage do we need on the grid? And how fast should we and can we shut down these old power plants? But what I come back to is that's really out of the scope of this legislation. The legislation is to give a tax credit to hydrogen generation when renewable energy is used. And it shouldn't be trying to drive other behaviors like never using non-renewable energy for hydrogen generation, or worrying about the, like you say, the firming and things. Those are problems that have to be solved. But I just think it's out of scope for what this legislation is trying to do. And so that's my point, is to come up with a scheme here where you can be assured, if you got a tax credit to generate hydrogen, that it really did come from some form of clean energy. But yeah, all good points, Franz. By the way, I realized my speakers were on mute. And so if I was asking for comments and you were trying to break in and I didn't hear you, I apologize. I didn't realize I was on mute, and Zoom didn't alert me to that. Anybody else like to comment or have some questions? Okay. All right. Well, good comments, Franz. Thank you. Thank you for that. All right. So I did submit a white paper, and I mentioned this last time, to the Treasury Department. And that white paper is posted on the CHN website. If you'd like to take a look, it's on the resources page. and it's right up at the top. And the paper is called "A Better Alternative to Hourly Matching." And public can still respond to this. And if you go to the irs.gov/newsroom, then search for 2022-58, and then select IRS seeks comments on upcoming energy guidance. You can put in your own comments on that. And if you want to take a look at my white paper and pull ideas from that to echo those, certainly could do that. Now, the comment period was due to close, I think, this week, but it's been extended, and all the IRS is saying is this fall. And I've heard people in the know say, well, they think it's October, and other people say, well, they think it's December, and I don't think we know. But you still can send in comments. And there's a lot of people that are doing that, which is, I think, why they extended this. All right, so Bryant, are you still on? I've had this slide a couple times and keep missing you, but I did want to introduce you. Are you still on, Bryant? And you'll have to unmute yourself, by the way.
Yes, I am. Can you see and hear me?
Yeah, we got you. So I'll let you introduce yourself, but Bryant basically contacted me and said he'd like to try to help out with some of the things going on. So Bryant, this is a little bit of your background, but I'll let you speak as long as you like to introduce yourself to the group.
All right, for sure. Yeah, sorry that you guys had to see this slide multiple times without me being here. So I'm finally here. Glad to meet everyone. I think I got an influx of LinkedIn connections, I think the first time it came up. So that's probably where that came about. So please continue to add me on there if you want to network. But yeah, this slide just basically gives my general background. So I studied electrical engineering at Howard in DC. Just wrapped up my master's in space systems engineering at Hopkins in December 2021. And part of my studies was just advanced technologies, commercialization, and just getting that market traction across applications. So hydrogen, quantum computing, desalinization, a whole family of just technologies and what it takes to bring that out of the lab, out of the science domain into the business domain and grow an actual user base. The way I got familiar with hydrogen was I saw Toyota Shell had a competition about how to better improve the supply chain. And I didn't know much about hydrogen. I knew about the Toyota Mirai, but I just figured I'd give it a shot because I had did some supply chain stuff and system design, system analysis. So I looked at how it was being generated, distributed, and the different opportunity costs towards the distribution supply chain, and put together a little proposal saying that we should maximize like some peer-to-peer capability, which looking back wasn't that smart because every time you compress and redistribute, there's a lot of energy losses in that. So that wasn't that bright looking back at it now. But that was my first exposure, and I made it pretty far in the competition. I got all the way to the finals, where I eventually got beat out by some PhDs who studied hydrogen studied hydrogen for their PhD. So they got the prize, not me, but it was great exposure. I'm big on everything green, ag tech, all things green. So just being exposed at that level just led me to do some more research on it and figure out how I could get involved. Here to help out with data analysis and the grant search and proposal writing, but really in summation, just want to see this technology, this amazing capability, the most abundant element in the universe. Just historically, all peoples from all walks of lives have thrived from making homes, products, making our livelihood off in situ resources that are abundant and readily available, roofs, ventilation and cooling in natural ways. And we've been doing that over generations. So I want to see this amazing capability, both here on Earth and in space, get the traction and attention that it deserves. So that's what I'm here to do, help out and collaborate to just push the ball forward however I can.
Yeah, well, thanks, Brian, and so glad to have you volunteer to come on board. Michael Grimwade is on as well. Michael is another volunteer that's offered to help me, and Brian and Michael and I had lunch together. I guess it's probably been over a month ago now, but kind of kicking around ideas and so forth. So does anybody have any comments or questions for Brian? Maybe some alumni that share the same schools or anything? No? Okay. Well, I know I'm off mute now. So, all right. Well,
Great
thanks.
energy. Welcome.
Oh, yeah, Ross, go ahead.
No, just saying great energy. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Okay. All right. Well, again, thanks, Brian. I think the trickiest thing now for me is to find enough time to keep a buffer for Bryant and Michael filled with some projects and some things that we want to do. So I'll work on that. All right. Let me keep going then. So there is a movement. Movement's the wrong thing, but is there some money or not? Let me get this straight here. There's a movement, I guess I'll stick with that, to set up what's called hydrogen twin cities. And this is something between the Department of Energy and what's called the Clean Energy Ministerial. And they're in Europe. And if you just Google Clean Energy Ministerial, you'll see what that is. But it's an initiative to pair up cities on different continents as hydrogen twin cities. And this is a global initiative, and they're trying to link these communities and cities around the world in order to basically collaborate, to share ideas, and to learn from each other on how to deploy clean hydrogen solutions and basically build the market. So the focus is trying to pair these two cities. One city would be considered a mentor, and probably not a lot of those in the world right now as far as hydrogen goes, but then the mentee cities that would have different levels of experience with hydrogen. There's a deadline to apply for this. It's October 19th this year. And if you want to look into this, here's the website. It's HeroX. It's not HerOx, but it's HeroX.com. And then H2 Twin Cities 2023. I thought about this and considered this for Denver, but it's not, or any of the other cities around, but it's not clear to me exactly who we'd try to reach out to. Part of the application here is to, you can throw your name in the hat as far as, well, we want to be a mentee or something, but you really need to find a mentor city to pair with. So the inaugural on this, and some of you might have seen this in the news, is Lancaster, California has paired up. It's actually a three-way here with Hawaii County on the Big Island and Nami, Japan, which is in the Fukushima prefecture. And this was awarded in November 2022. And basically, these cities are pledging to try to share best practices and strategies. And this
Did we lose Brian, or am I missing
I was
it?
about to ask also. I think it might just be a minute, maybe. But good luck for Lancaster. I think they're ambitious.
Is there anyone on the call that's involved with hydrogen at NREL? I'll take that as a no.
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I didn't get the question.
I was asking if there's anybody. When I started getting LinkedIn ads, I saw NREL, National Renewable Energy Lab, pop up a few number of times, and I've been trying to visit that facility for a while. So I was asking if there's anybody on the call that's involved with hydrogen at NREL.
Yeah, we have several people in the group that work for NREL, and Keith Whitty, he is in a leading position at NREL and has been active member of this group. But he has kind of a large national.
Can you throw that name in the chat so that I can reach out to him? Keith Whitby.
I'm in the car.
All good.
I think someone else might be able to put the name in the text.
I can put it on
yeah, we
for
have,
you.
Okay. Thanks.
Brian will, I'm sure, have it. Brian, you're on mute. We seem to have lost you.
Yeah, I'm back. My internet dropped. I'm running off my cell phone now. So,
Okay.
but yeah, it's Keith Whipke, Wipke, and if Kari, if you can put that in the chat, his actual email in the chat, that'd be great. So sorry about that, everybody, but I'm back. And it sounded like there was some side discussion, so that's great. Appreciate that. All right, any other comments on this Twin Cities? I didn't really intend to try to chase this, partly for limited bandwidth, and also it wasn't clear to me who we'd try to pair up with here in Colorado. So, but if anybody's got some ideas or wants to try to lend a hand to chase this, there may not be a lot of applicants. So it could be that it's not too hard to win. No money is attached, so I'm not sure how much that helps us, but you never know. All right. There's an article about this Lancaster, Hawaii County, and I've created a shortcut for that. It's first H2 Twins is the link on tinyurl. All right. More news of funding and other support is it's called the Make It Prize, and the purpose is to accelerate manufacturing of critical clean energy technologies. So there are two tracks. One is around facilities, and that would be entities interested in building domestic manufacturing facilities. And the other is strategies, and that's teams working to promote clean energy manufacturing in their region. So that strategies is a little more general. But facilities, there's up to 5 million per winner. I think there's only a total of 30 million on the prize. So not a lot of winners. But the things that are mentioned is precision manufactured subcomponents, optimized balance of plant components, and production capacity for hydrogen specific infrastructure. So there's more information here. Now, there was a webinar today that I tried to attend, but I had another meeting run over and I wasn't able to attend, but they are putting a recording of that on. So you can probably find out more information by going to this herox.com Make It Facilities website. And the deadline for this is coming right up. It's October 18th. So strategies, less money there, up to $400K per winner. And again, there's some more information there, and the same. And by the way, these deadlines, this October 18th is like a concept paper. And so it doesn't have to be a full-blown proposal at that point, but at least get an idea and get your hat in the ring. So CHN initiatives. We're looking for companies or universities or labs or someone in the area that's interested in hosting an open house to just show the facility to our stakeholders and provide a company tour. And then we'd like to follow that up with some kind of a networking social. It's been a while. I think it was a year ago that we had our last face-to-face that was down at the press club down in Denver, but we could certainly set up some kind of a social at either a restaurant or something like that afterwards. I think we can be open to the time of day. I assume we'd probably make this maybe a 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock event, and then we could just move on to dinner or drinks or socializing or whatever afterwards. So looking for anyone, universities.
Hey, Brian.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Guy Babbitt with Caesar. I'd be glad to host that, and we could show you the our integrate program. Our integrate program, which is a fuel cell and gas turbine system, and a few other things that people are interested in doing that in Fort Collins.
Yeah, fantastic, Guy. I'm gonna write that down, and maybe you and I can chat in the next few days or whatever about a time, how we want to do that, and kind of take it from there. Now, Fort Collins, so that's a little bit of a drive for folks, but I'm in Evergreen, but I'd absolutely come up for that. I would love to see that, and I know we've got a number of stakeholders up in Fort Collins, so I'm sure we'll have a nice little event and maybe give folks an excuse to come on up to Fort Collins. Yeah, thanks, Guy. Who else might, at least in principle, be interested? No takers at the time. All right. Well, I'm sure we're going to have others that that step forward as we go along. So this will be good. We'll get a chance to get a little bit of FaceTime with each other. All right. Really running down to some of the last slides here. There was a news announcement that Canada has their, well, it's basically Ontario's first fuel station. There are other fuel stations in Canada, not very many, but this is going to be located at the Toronto Pearson Airport, and it's partially funded by $1 million. I assume that's Canadian from Natural Resources Canada. It is going to fuel both light and heavy duty vehicles. And by the way, the picture there is that's not what it looks like at the airport in Toronto. The company Carlson Energy is going to build and own and operate the system. And this is a collaboration between Greater Toronto Airports Authority and Carlson Energy. Now, as I said at the top of the slide, there really are just 5 retail hydrogen stations in Canada, and 4 are in British Columbia, which kind of helps to extend the hydrogen infrastructure and so forth that's in California and moving up through Washington and Oregon. And this is going to be the first one in Quebec. So really glad to see that going in. Hopefully it continues all the way to fruition, because I think they're just now in the beginning stages of this. Okay, I think, just an update on the podcast. Again, try to encourage everybody that if you do go into the podcast, please subscribe. That does help our ratings and so forth. There's a lot of episodes out there. Some are probably more of interest to you than others, but some interesting things. And of course, they're not all about hydrogen. We've got things in there about direct air capture of carbon using algae, and things about hydrogen wells and other things. So definitely check that out. Now, that is my last slide, and I'm pretty ahead of schedule today. So we've got time. Always we can end early, but if anybody's got thoughts, questions, any other subject they'd like to bring up, please feel free.
So, Brian, are we still on for with your request for me to host next month? Or?
We are, and thanks. I'm going to be in England on vacation next time for the meeting, and so I've asked Franz to run the meeting. And Franz, you'll be pleased to know that I've lined up Accelera, and I don't know if anybody from Accelera is on. They're a new business unit. It's a part of Cummins. It's their power business. Is anybody from Accelera on right now? No? Okay. And then Franz, I'm also, I think, going to have Fortescue on. I made connection with a bunch of folks from Fortescue, and I did see somebody earlier. Savannah, you don't mean to put you on the spot, but Savannah Rice from Fortescue is on. If you want to just say hello, Savannah.
Hi, yes. I'll introduce myself. So Savannah Rice from Fortescue. Sorry, let me get my camera on here.
Well, thanks for, by the way, correcting my pronunciation, Fortescue.
Yeah, it's a little confusing. But yeah, so Fortescue, we just opened an office in Boulder in January, and I started in April. So we're, offshoot of the large iron ore mining company, but we're looking into, all different green energy solutions to decarbonize the mining business and try to become a, global producer of hydrogen. So that's one of our big goals. So we're, ramping up here, been here for 4 months with most of the team, and yeah, excited to be involved.
All right. Well, and as I said, we've talked about Fortescue presenting next month. I don't know if we're finalized on that yet, so don't panic, Savannah, if you think that's maybe not a done deal yet, but we'll work that out.
Yeah, I'll get
Brian,
around with the team.
Brian, I will set up some time that we can you can transfer what you have lined up for next week, and then take over for next month.
Yeah, and Franz, if you've got some things that you'd like to present, maybe you want to talk about converter tech as well, make it kind of a company overview type of a session. That's fine. If these meetings are an hour and a half. If you feel like you want to go an hour or whatever, I'll leave that up to you, but give you a chance to share some things that you've probably been wanting to share for some time.
Yeah, we'll take what you have lined up and I'll put my personal mark on it. That's
All right.
Okay.
Maybe you want to give your view on hourly matching. No, I'm joking about that, but yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Okay. All right. It's not that common that we end this early. So this is a good opportunity if folks have got some things that are on their mind. Any other comments, thoughts, questions from folks?
Hey, Brian, I do have a question for Savannah if she's still on.
Savannah?
Yep.
So you said you were in iron ore mining that's trying to green up. Are you guys trying to generate hydrogen through serpentization, like the geologic hydrogen, or is this something that you're just trying to green up operations?
So we're trying to green up operations. So there's the metals side of the business and the green energy side of the business. And the whole purpose of the energy side was to find technologies that can green up the mining side. And one of the parts of the energy business is green hydrogen. So looking at electrolysis.
Fantastic. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I just have been reading a lot about the geological hydrogen. Brian, very cool presentation today. But I know serpentization is kind of a gaining steam, and it's something where people are able to actually generate hydrogen geologically by injecting certain materials down into iron-rich cavities and being able to induce their own things or own hydrogen through a similar process of what happens in the rift areas that Brian was talking about. So just curious if that was something you were looking into or if that's something totally off the radar.
We're keeping an eye out. We're definitely interested in all different, manners of hydrogen production, and just seeing what kind of comes of that. And we work with mines on certain stuff, so we're familiar with the Geologic Hydrogen Consortium that was mentioned earlier with Jeff Ellis at the USGS.
Very cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, when Fortescue does their presentation, of course, we'll go into all the different parts of the business and why things are here. But I think, Savannah, I'm not too out of line to say that Fortescue had looked around for locating this division. They finally decided to put into Golden or Boulder. No, Golden, I'm sorry, right in the first place. I don't know if you want to comment on that. But.
Yeah, so we studied all across the US. Well, first the Northern Hemisphere, and then decided the US was probably the best place to go outside of Australia, and located in Colorado based on a bunch of different things, but it was kind of narrowed down to, Colorado, Michigan, really looking at where the economic and political environment is friendly for this, where there's a lot of talent, and where there's a lot of universities, research institutions, and kind of that startup ecosystem that we had in mind. And Colorado really stood out, and has continued to let us know that we made the right decision with recent, things coming out of Colorado.
Yeah. All right. Very good. Well, we're all very proud that Fortescue did pick this area. And I think the Colorado Energy Office probably gets a little bit of credit for that. I'm just looking through the list of folks on. I don't think anybody from the Energy Office is on today. Typically they are, but anyway, well, welcome to Fortescue. And I'm confident that we'll meet expectations of the environment here for the development of hydrogen.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah. All right. Other thoughts, questions, comments?
This is Brian. I thought the Twin Cities concept is very interesting. You see this like type of approach used often with like high-speed rail and things like that. And I've looked at the in-rail solar irradiance map to see one of the main drivers, a big driver that has been promoted for hydrogen is the off-season supply for like heating and cooling energy. So that's it's just interesting to see a different application of the twin city concept outside of usually you see with high speed rail, but the way that you can leverage that type of polarity in the city selection could be very beneficial if done strategically.
Well, I think the catch is that we have to have a city to pair with in mind, and I don't have that. I'm not sure where to try to find that either, especially with a looming deadline of October 18th, I think it was, something like that, 19th. So if anybody on the call has got some ideas or thinks there could be a link somewhere that is worth chasing, we can put some resources into trying to do that. I just, I don't right at the present time. So, okay, other thoughts or comments? That's it. All right. Well, for maybe the first time ever, we'll give you back a little bit of your time, but thank you, everyone. And I hope you give Franz your full support next month when he runs the meeting. And I'll set some things up for you, Franz, so you're not hanging out there on your own. All right. Well, I think we'll adjourn. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much, Brian. Have a good day.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Brian.
Thank you.
Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Rich.